Hey guys, it is November 14th, thus the 14th day of Art Soundoff, and I was having kind of a rough day today, so I opted to use one of the prompts provided on the official Art Soundoff site. You guys can find that in the link description below, and that is, how have your expectations of your art changed since you started? And I started, instead of doing when I started making art, because even as a kid I enjoyed illustration, I enjoyed rendering from photos. I tested for talented art in Louisiana like 3 or 4 times. So while I'm not one of those people who are like, I was always going to be an artist. I mean, all kids draw. It's just a matter of like quitting. And I never really quit, and a lot of artists never really quit, but I also wasn't serious. I did do it for fun. I did it as a hobby, but whatever ability I had wasn't encouraged or nurtured by my immediate family too much. They weren't discouraging, but like I remember one of my friends got private art lessons by one of the art teachers so that she could test into talented art, and I begged my parents and they were like, no, we're not spending money on that. But I was in ballet, you know, stuff like that. Not that that's a problem. I mean, you know, when you have kids who want to do everything, you have to pick your battles, and I was already enrolled in ballet. But it's not like I had this family that just lavish money on helping me become an artist. Like a lot of other artists talk about how their parents were artists themselves, so they always had access to a studio of supplies. And to be fair, my dad used to draw a lot for me, which I really enjoyed. I remember when I was 4 and we would watch my kids' shows and he would draw caricatures of the characters for me, that kind of stuff. And my grandfather was sort of a hobbyist architect. He designed several buildings in the parish we grew up in. And I remember getting in a lot of trouble rifling through his desk because he always had these really cool architect pencils and other kinds of like drawing toys that I wanted to play with. So I did have those in my life, but neither of them were professional artists, and neither of them had large hoards of art supplies to share with me. My grandparents did buy me art supplies though, because I wanted them. Like I was like, I want this one and that one for Christmas kind of thing. So they did definitely encourage that and provided me with slightly nicer art supplies than I would have had access to. But it wasn't until I was 14 and manga started making its way over to the US, and Powerpuff Girls was on, that I really started thinking about going into art. And it wasn't just any art, it was comics. It has been comics from the start. I fell in love with comics like the day I saw Inuyasha at Suncoast. Archie never did it for me. Superhero comics never ever did it for me. Couldn't stand any of those. It was manga that did it for me because I really liked the more feminine drawing aesthetic, and I really liked the spot black fills, and I really liked the cute clothing. And I really liked the storytelling and the expressive faces and how girls were just drawn differently than they were in Western comics at the time. And a lot of what was coming across was like 80s shonen, 80s seinen. So there was some like fan servicey elements, but not nearly what there is now. And the drawing styles were very rounded, very cute, large eyes, that sort of thing. Like Rumiko Takahashi or Adachi Mitsuru were huge influences on my art. And they still are, to be honest. And a lot of the artists who I enjoy now, like, if we're being honest about who I really, really like, it's artists who have that sort of bouncy, cartoony manga style that has heavier black line work than other manga styles, and it has spot blacks, and it's less reliant on tone. Like, that really, really jives with me. And my black and white artwork often is reflective of that. But when I started drawing comics, I wanted to do a webcomic because I was reading Sluggy Freelance at the time, and I really liked Sluggy Freelance. So I wanted to do something that was slice of life, not pre-scripted, page a day kind of thing, which for me, I know some people can make that work, but for me that just does not sustainable for me. But at the time when I was 14, I was drawing this comic every single day called Truth About Gaming because I thought I was a gamer. I did play a lot of video games, but I didn't grow up with video games, so it was sort of like, oh wow, this cool thing that I'm finally allowed to do. And even though it was called Truth About Gaming, it really wasn't about gaming at all. And it had a bunch of anime characters that I really liked in the comic with me. And it was inked with ballpoint pens, and Crayola used to make super fine liners, so it was inked with those. It was really great, and you guys will never see it probably. And then I started reading Azumanga Daioh and Digichurat, so basically 4-koma comics, and I fell in love with the way you can handle a joke in 4-koma. You have 4 panels going diagonally to tell your joke, which means you're not going to spoil the joke for yourself by reading too quickly, which is one of the problems with some Western comics, is the joke is already spoiled by the time you get to it. And that's just sort of the nature of the format, not really the ability of the storyteller. So I really liked 4-koma, so I spent 2 or 3 years drawing hundreds of 4-koma strips about this cat girl and her anthropomorphic animal people friends who worked in a bakery, and that was just in pencil. I didn't ink that at all, so it was grayscale pencil. And I was doing that every day for a while. And my art just wasn't improving at all, but the art resources on the internet weren't really available either, so I didn't really realize how much I sucked. And I had one other art sort of friend in my group, but she was just like super condescending to me all the time. So I just figured it was because she didn't like me. And she didn't like me, like, let's be blunt, she did not like me. But it wasn't because I was a poor artist, but I was a poor artist. So I really wasn't improving. So my expectations, okay, so at that time, all I really wanted was to draw one really pretty anime girl, and then I would be done. Then I could move on with my life. So it was pursuing that kind of stupid goal, and all the comics that went around that for whatever reason kept me drawing for all those years, kept me making art, even though I was an honors student and a straight A student for the most part. So I was just always slammed, and I was also in choir and ensemble and ROTC, so I was really, really busy, but I still found all this time to make comics. And part of the reason was because my younger brother was diagnosed as childhood bipolar in 4th grade, and so we spent a lot of time going to doctors, like 3 times a week, and my mother has always had a hard time letting me grow up, so she would make me come with her. So just massive amounts of my free time were spent in the car driving to New Orleans, sitting in a doctor's office who isn't even my doctor. So that was a really good outlet for drawing, because drawing takes up very little space. You can stop it and resume it. Especially comics, once you know what you're doing with that page, you can stop it and resume it. So drawing was kind of an ideal hobby for me, especially because I didn't really have a lot of handheld game systems. So that's kind of just why I stuck with it. But I really, really loved comics, and I still really love comics, and I was really passionate about comics. And there was this one other girl that I knew of. So when I was in school, there was me, John Michael, Chase Shelf, and Michelle Luquette, who drew comics. And none of us were actually friends at any point during high school, except for me and John Michael my senior year. So I didn't have like this group of comic friends that I could share my comics with and get feedback from. And my friends, like, in high school, it was like convenience friends, because I lived in this really small town. So I had some friends who I'm still really good friends with, like Lane Damaso, but there was just a lot of people who, like, we were friends in high school because we didn't know anybody else, but we're not friends now because we do know. Resuming, sorry about that. When my phone got a Skype call, I decided to just end the recording. So, in high school, I never really had access to a group that I could grow with, a group that I could get help from, a group that I could share art supplies with. I was on my own, and I didn't have any money, and my parents wouldn't let me order stuff off the internet, and I lived in this really podunk town that barely even had a Walmart. So once I got to college, things really started to broaden for me, and I decided in college that I was going to really push myself to be more outgoing and make more friends in the things I cared about, instead of just convenience friends. You know, we hang out because nobody else likes us. But I didn't have a car, and I didn't have any money, and I was on scholarship, and our bookstore sold basically no art supplies, so I'd have to beg and plead for a ride just to pick up the supplies for my major. I was a fine arts major in undergrad. So even improvement at that point was really slow because we didn't have an illustration department, we didn't have a drawing department, we didn't have a comics department. And even though I loved many of my professors, pretty much all of them thought I was wasted on comics. A lot of them wanted to see me go into fine art illustration, like really wanted to see me go into that. So it wasn't until I applied and was accepted into the grad department at SCAD that I was ever around other comic people. And like, I attended anime cons and stuff, but none of them ever, I don't know if you guys have done anime cons, but like, you'll get one comic person in the bunch and then the rest just don't care at all because that's a lot of time and it's a lot of money and it's not necessarily worth it. So like, even though I was like in the anime crowd and the gaming crowd, I didn't really have comic friends until I went to SCAD. And I thought we were all going to be friends. I was like, comic people, this is going to be great. No. Not at all. Most of us couldn't stand each other, especially by my second year. I was just like, because a lot of people went into the comics department at the graduate level, which I don't understand why, so they could go out drinking every night and party. I guess they didn't do that enough in undergrad, so this was their chance to do it. Whereas I had already gotten my stupid out in undergrad, and I was ready to be serious. Well, serious in comics, you guys know what I mean. But I wanted to improve. I was spending a lot of money to be there every semester, and I wanted to improve. And I did actually find a little group of friends who cared just as much as I did, and so as long as I was with my little group of friends, we were great. And I liked a lot of my professors, and I grew a lot, and I improved a lot, and my discernment changed a lot. Like I really started to be able to nitpick what wasn't working with my stuff. Now, in between undergrad and grad school, I got really serious about learning human anatomy. See, it wasn't really, I took a human anatomy class at UNO, but it was taught in a fine art way, not in a comic way. And there is a difference. The fine art way is not so focused on you actually learning how to do it in a reproductive way. You're basically always going to be drawing from reference. A comic way, you learn the basic landmarks so that you can sketch it out quickly, and then if you need reference, you can go pull that up and then refine it. Two very different methods. So I was fortunate enough to be in an online group that was an art group, but it wasn't a close-knit art group, where they would talk about resources and share links. And so I was able to read Andrew Loomis' Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, and a lot of Bridgman, and a lot of Hogarth, and Glenn Vilppu, which literally changed my life because it totally changed how I approached drawing. And it made a huge difference because before then, I was trying to draw like those how to draw manga books. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? With the sausage limbs and the bubble joints. And my art was just not ever improving. And it wasn't until I was introduced to the Glenn Vilppu drawing method that I could start actually improving and start breaking down the face and the body and everything else in the world in an understandable and reproducible way. So my expectations of art went from, I always wanted to be a comic artist, still want to be a comic artist, never changed. When I was 15 to 19, I thought I was going to move to Japan and be a jet and work on manga. No. Now I want to stay here in the US and make quality comics for kids. That's something I'm super pumped about, super into. I think it needs to happen. It really disheartens me to see how stuff just gets pumped out and it's like, oh, that's okay, it's for kids. Like, no, this is garbage. I know, strong words. Comic people, like comic, like especially indie comic people, we don't usually talk too negatively about each other. But when I was doing my thesis at SCAD, I did it on reading comprehension and panel layout for young readers. And so I had to read like hundreds of kids' comics, and I noticed there was a huge hole in the market. Like, Toon Books cover the pre-reading crowd really well up to preschool, and then middle grade has like Raina Telgemeier, and that does, you know, her stuff's really great too. And then high school has Blankets, but there's not a lot, period. There's just not a lot of diversity when you compare it to other age ranges in comics. Like YA is just flush. And there are one or two that really stand out, and the rest is sort of just all ages. Like, yes, your kid can read it, but it's not meant for kids. Like, Bone is not a kid's comic. Yeah, I would let my 13-year-old read it, no problem, but you shouldn't be giving it to your 6-year-old kind of thing. And I felt like there needed to be stuff for younger readers that was good. And my mom was just so like, you need to leave comics, you need to leave comics. I always thought you should do kids' books, you need to leave comics. So I kind of turned that into, okay, well, let me use all these beautiful children's books I read as a kid as inspiration to make beautiful watercolor comics for children, because that just wasn't really a thing. And so that's what I'm doing now. So 13-year-old me living in Japan, drawing shoujo manga with a shonen aesthetic. 30-year-old me drawing comics for kids, still have kind of a manga-esque aesthetic, because there are things about that style that I just genuinely love, and I've tried other styles and I still keep coming back to this. I love the expressiveness of the faces. I love the larger eyes that just seem to light up with emotion. I love just how cute and bubbly and appealing and engaging that stuff is. I think it is great for younger readers, very easy for them to read those faces. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why I have the drawing style that I have. I've given it a lot of thought and I've spent a lot of time and research on it, and I'm still at it, so, you know. And my approach towards comics and how I promote them have changed a lot. When I was younger, I didn't have a scanner. I had shared the family computer and I had limited internet access, so nothing I drew went online unless one of my friends scanned it. So things never made it online. Now I have a scanner and a smartphone and I have a tablet and I can put things up and share them with people. So even though I work traditionally, it is very easy for me to digitize things and distribute them. So, and to be fair, 15 years have passed. A lot has changed, and changed for the better, and in some ways changed for the worse. When I was much younger, when I was 19, that was when the Rising Stars of Manga contest was going on with Tokyo Pop, and I thought that was what I was going to do. I was like preparing myself to improve enough to be able to submit to that. And that kind of went down in horrible flames, and many of the artists got burned, so I'm glad I didn't get involved with that. But, you know, as I get older, opportunities for you to approach publishers is getting scarce. They're not doing cons, they're not doing portfolio reviews. You basically have to get lucky. It's a numbers game, and they have to find you. A lot of the companies are no longer doing open submissions, so your options are do a bunch of anthologies, push your stuff online, and just try to be visible as much as possible. However, webcomics have taken off in a big way. So as a webcomic person, you have a lot more options to reach your audience and get your stuff out there. There's Patreon, there's Kickstarter, there's Gumroad. You can put ads on your site to help fund your content. You can have a YouTube channel to help spread the word. All of these were things that just weren't available when I was younger and webcomics were first coming about. Unfortunately, webcomics have sort of moved away from the awesome collective that like KeenSpot and KeenSpace used to do. But there are many of us who'd love to see that make a resurgence, and there's some of us who are working hard on that. You know, just because things are in the past doesn't make them all terrible. There's a lot we can learn and a lot we can reinvent and bring back. So there's a lot of ways that my art and my outlook on art and my outlook on comics have changed in the past 15 years. It's been a long time. And I hope things continue to change. I hope in 15 years from now, I'm in a different place. Ideally still in comics, but hopefully I'm just doing something different, because I hope that my work grows as I grow. So that was my 14th art sound off. And I lied to you guys. I technically started drawing at 13 when Gundam Wing came out. But I wasn't like consistently doing it until Inuyasha and Rumika Takahashi and Suncoast and all that at 15. So there was a 2-year period where I was more serious about drawing, but I didn't think of myself as that. I was a writer, and I wrote stories for my friends. And I've talked to you guys about that in another vlog, actually, with Tyler, who dropped the ball on a project he pitched to me. And then I was like, I'm never letting this happen again. I'm going to learn how to draw. So that's how we got started, right? Sometimes stubbornness can be used to your benefit. Anyway, that is another art sound off, and I'm Becca Hilburn from Natto Soup Studio sounding off. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!